Hello, I'm Caroline Stockmann, Chief Executive of the ACT. In this really important session, we're going to talk about mental and physical well-being and how important that is and how important resilience is in times of stress, such as during this lockdown. I hope that if you can just get one or two things out of this session that help you, that we've achieved our aim. It's very personal. Some things will suit one person, some things another. But let's see what you find of it. It's really important in times of change, uncertainty, and challenge to take care of yourself and to make sure you're looking after your well-being. However, in times of stress, we often are so busy focusing on the immediate issues that we're having to deal with, prioritizing the firefighting and the urgent matters hitting our desks, that we tend not to think of attending to our well-being at all. It's similar to how in business we often focus on the immediate at the expense of the longer term. That classic catch-22 situation. But just as making the time for strategic long-term thinking is a sign of a true leader, so is looking after our own well-being, whether it's physical or mental health. Another similarity which strikes me is our attitude towards self-development and mastering what are often called the softer skills. This often comes lower down the pecking order, with technical skills and competencies coming first. However, we also see here that this approach is self-limiting, and taking the time to develop competencies such as strategic influencing, communications, and relationship building skills is time well spent. As mentioned, we're very good at focusing on the short term and never getting to the long term. And that's exactly the issue we can find here, as well-being is about a sustainable approach to life and work. Nowadays in the business world, and in particular during this COVID-19 crisis, physical and mental well-being are talked about a lot. We're certainly made aware of the need to reflect on how well we're looking after ourselves and others, and how we're coping with the added stresses brought about by the pandemic. However, how good we are at examining that, especially when it comes to ourselves, is questionable. It strikes me that most people I talk to worry about the strain and stress others are under and are trying to help them where they can. But conversations around how they themselves are feeling and coping are far less frequent. We still see ourselves as having to put on a brave face, show we're invincible, or sometimes we don't even realize we are suffering under the pressure, and health issues, both mental and physical, can just creep up on us. So, as I've said many times before, but in different contexts, we need to treat this like any other project. If we believe this is a stressful time for people, and if we believe we're happier and more productive if we're feeling well in ourselves, then we have enough evidence, I think, to ensure we tackle the matter as seriously as it deserves. So, let's think about how we can plan our own mental and physical health project. One theory has it that there are 4 pillars to well-being. These are nutrition, sleep, exercise, and environment. Looking at nutrition first, it can be difficult to approach this topic because we can see it as a minefield and something we worry might take up a lot of time or be difficult to do. Maybe we know we need to eat more healthily, and that in itself is a real step forward for many of us, but we just don't know exactly what we need to do. Well, the good news is that nutrition is an area we're fully in control of. Put simply, we can control what we eat and drink. And as part of this, the key thing to look at is our blood sugar level, which affects our stress hormones, and this in turn affects how we feel. Refined carbohydrates such as sugary foods, caffeine, and trans fats all increase your blood sugar levels. Sometimes this is a good thing. We need that energy boost. But if overdone, it can make you feel sluggish and make it difficult for you to concentrate. But as I've said, we can control this, and simple changes, such as adding protein into your meals, whether it be a handful of raw nuts or eggs at breakfast, or beans and pulses at lunch. This can help you to control your blood sugar level and make a positive change. And back to my earlier point, plan your diet for the working day at home And make this plan as important as having read the papers for a critical meeting or ensuring your phone battery is charged before a series of important calls. Take it seriously. You may also want to consider the empty calories of alcohol. Whilst it's often relaxing to have a drink for those who do indulge, we see that people are drinking a lot more under lockdown, and the issue is that alcohol often acts as a depressant. So, thinking through our weekly units and avoiding binge drinking can be very helpful. Like the old adage, a little of what you like, but you can get too much of a good thing. And don't forget water. It's a quick way to get oxygen into the blood and helps us keep sharp and focused. Then there's sleep. Sleep not only helps you to be healthier, feel better, and live longer, but it can also help you to perform better at work. There are 5 phases to a sleep cycle. In the first 3 phases of sleep, which are relatively quick, our body recovers from the day. This is the physical recovery part of our sleep. Our muscles, our hair follicles, our bones, they're recovering. During phases 4 or 5, which are our deep phases of sleep, we're flushing toxins from the brain. This is the time that helps us to reset our brains in order for us to feel fresh and awake the next day. Some research has even shown that if someone sleeps for less than 6 hours a night for 6 nights in a row, their stress hormone levels are 10 times the healthy average. 10 times. So it's important to ensure that we prioritize sleep and ensure we get enough. An added thought is to look at our routine before we go to sleep. If we're on screens all evening, this can increase our body's exposure to blue light, which can stop us from sleeping due to overstimulation. So best to leave some time away from work or other screen viewing for a little time before going to bed. I read somewhere an hour is good to aim for. Again, if this becomes part of a plan and is given importance, then it will happen and the results will be there. If we ignore this and believe that we don't have the time, then we actually take away time from ourselves ultimately. And taking control of our sleep as well as eating habits is in itself helpful, as research shows that in a time of great uncertainty such as now, we humans will feel much better if there remain things we can actually take charge of and make happen. Exercise is the third pillar, and it can be defined as any form of movement. Although a lot of movement is restricted right now, we can and should take time out to move around a bit. Whether that's doing Joe Wicks in the UK and possibly around the world, it's certainly a favourite with many of our staff's children. Walking around the garden, if you have one, or going for a walk, cycle ride, or run. We should all take the time out to do something physical. We need this to develop our cardiovascular health, muscle development, and indeed our brain capacity, as our neural pathways are also improved, a fact that I only learnt recently. Exercise is also a great way of bringing our stress levels under control and giving us a bit of time for ourselves and, importantly, away from our computers. Even the fact that the government in the UK and elsewhere in the world has allowed people one piece of daily exercise outside the home is evidence that this is really important for us. And for those of you with children, you'll recognize very well the kind of mood they'd be in if they'd been watching videos all Saturday morning versus, in normal times, going out to do some sport or play in the garden, for example. And we adults are just the same. Hopefully this all makes sense, but the trick is again to ensure it's part of your plan and then stick to it. I know this is a challenge, as I've not been good at it myself always, nor at sleep and eating right. But then once I'd run through the logic and made a decision to commit, things were easier. And with exercise, there are apps out there and colleagues and friends who you can compare notes with, as we're often better at sticking with things if we've made a commitment to other people, not just ourselves. Even the act of stating out loud our intentions and sharing them with others, be that via social media or on a more personal level, will have a positive impact. And mantras can also help, telling your mind and making your mind believe it. But no time for that here, though I have recorded a podcast on the subject if you'd like to listen to that. Environment, being the fourth pillar, can have a significant effect on how we function, not just in terms of physical environment, And here I mean having some workspace, being able to take calls without being interrupted, etc. But also in terms of the pastoral environment. For example, how supported do you feel at work? I'll talk a little later on about tips you can use to help with ensuring your environment is as positive as possible. It's a challenge for sure where you may be working in the same room as a partner or the kids, your internet connection being shared across multiple users and slowing down when you need it most, and you may be experiencing others in the family assuming you should have more time for them now you're working from home. But there are things we can do to make the best of our environment. And again, the concept of having something you can control is really important here too. So let's now talk a little bit about resilience. When our normal environment changes, we often feel out of sorts and find it more difficult to cope with decision making and situations that we would normally find uneventful. Resilience, or bounce back ability, is key to navigating these changes. It helps you to deal with the situation, learn from any mistakes, and grow stronger. But what does it really mean to be resilient? Why is it important? And how can you develop your resilience? I often hear people say that others are more resilient than them, as if people are born resilient or not. But as with most things in life, resilience is simply a skill that you can learn. You may not feel you're resilient, but there are things you can do to build this. Resilience gives us the strength to manage uncertainty and adversity in our lives, and the stress that can come about as a result. A good way to think of this is by thinking of a tree. If you have strong roots and are grounded, you can flex the trunk to move with the winds that blow you about, or that provide the stresses and strains in your working environment. You can bend, adapt, and spring back. Reminds me of the bamboo in my garden, which is amazing in how it survives through storms. So, think about the last job interview that you were involved with, whether you were the interviewer or the interviewee. I'm sure that you were asked questions about lessons learned when projects didn't go as planned. How you respond when things don't go as expected, and very few projects do go exactly to plan, shows a lot about how you deal with the unexpected and how you adapt to changing situations. But why is this important? Well, building resilience helps you to cope with stressful situations and will enable you to feel more in control. So how can it be developed? In the recent Black Swan edition of The Treasure, which you can find on your app, I reflected on some resilience builders in the form of 5 key areas. Rather than repeat that, I'd like now to reflect on a slightly different model, but one which has quite a bit of crossover, to reinforce the main points and express things in a way which might just strike a chord with you personally. This model describes 6 key areas you can look at to develop your resilience: attitude, responses, commitment, control, relationships, and health. With attitude, the way you see challenges will play a key part in how you react to them. Do you think of them as problems or opportunities? Optimists tend to be more resilient than pessimists simply because they see the opportunities more quickly and they focus their mindset to find the positives in the situation. One of my Strategic Insight podcasts focuses solely on positivity for this very reason. Another one focuses on motivational states. So if you find you're in a pessimistic situation, you can have a tool that will help you to get out of it. Next, when looking at responses, the second area, it's important to understand what triggers a stress response in you. And this will be different for everyone. You may not be able to avoid these stressful situations, but by being aware of them, you can control your reaction and build techniques to ensure you can control that reaction as much as possible. Even employing a count to 10 before reacting technique can help you to feel more in control and therefore to respond in a more measured manner. Or indeed, taking yourself out of yourself and looking at yourself as if you're acting. That removal can help you feel in control again. Another thing to consider is mind over matter here. Just to be clear, it's not the thing that happened, the event, that causes the response. It's actually your mind. And that comes back to mantras again. You tell your mind something, it will believe it. Tell it enough. So that's how you can gain control in this area. Commitment next is about understanding your motivations. For example, your motivation in the workplace. It's important to step back and think about what you actually want, what drives you, and to look at your career and life goals with this in mind. The more your role aligns with your core values and motivations, the better able you'll be to cope with changes. And it may help you in your well-being plan to ensure that each and every day you are consciously recognizing the hours you put in that are connected to your core values. Some people like to reflect on this at the outset of the day, to remind themselves of their focus and have something to look forward to. And others find it helpful to reflect back on the day and see how far they went to reflecting their core values over that period. And of course, you can do both. As a fourth area, we come back to control, which I've already referenced a couple of times so far. It's important to understand what you can control and to focus on the things you can manage instead of dwelling on those you can't. Knowing what you can and can't influence can help you work through complex situations and ensure you focus your energy in the right way. And leaving to the side the areas you cannot control, consciously allowing them, giving them permission to go into a holding pattern of sorts, can create a sense of liberation, which is very helpful. Relationships, then, both at work and at home, our fifth area, can have a huge impact on how we feel. As a manager, there's a lot you can do to build this area of resilience in the work environment, including by providing clear and consistent communication and being available for your team, so that those who work for and with you know that they can talk to you. Encouraging personal development and taking the time to provide those with whom you work with feedback, for example, through regular catch-up sessions, practicing team building, and ensuring that everyone knows they are part of an effectively functioning team, are all things to address if you're not doing so already. A team which works in a collaborative and supportive environment will achieve more and have more resilience than one that is insular. And finally, you need to look after your mental and physical health, as we've already discussed. This is more important now than ever. As said, ensure you move around during the day and take time out for exercise, even if it's just a walk around the garden or your living room. Also ensure you eat fresh fruit and vegetables, and that you have balanced meals so that your body feels balanced. And take some time for rest and relaxation, as well as make sure you get enough sleep. Finally, we've tried also to think about specific things that may be useful to know in these exceptional circumstances. Having spoken to a number of change management coaches, as well as reflecting ourselves and myself on my past as a coach, we've put together 4 things to think about in this COVID-19 world. 1. It's important to maintain boundaries. When managing a team, you need to separate checking in with people from checking their performance. If you blur these boundaries, you can make your team feel unable to talk about how they're feeling, the checking in part, as they may worry you'll think this will affect their performance. Also think about the boundaries between work and home. Some people can move fluidly between the two, and they find that is how they get balance. Whereas others need to separate the two, which is increasingly difficult without the standard commute beginning and end of every day. One way of tackling this is to ensure you go for a stroll in the garden, if you have one, before and after work, or otherwise simulate that period where you transition from home to work and vice versa. 2. Be transparent. Show the people you work with how you've come to the decisions you've made so that they feel informed and engaged and not dictated to. Telling the story of where you are now and what the next stages will be will really help. For example, being honest about firefighting now, working out, for example, how to use online systems, and then what the next stage will be. Maybe once the systems are in place, the priority will be to manage client relationships. I found recently my team were worrying about the potential to be sent back into the office before they were ready, which prompted me to talk to them in our regular all-staff briefs about my philosophy and reassure them accordingly. 3. Manage your positivity. While some negativity is healthy, most research evidences that positivity is good for your mental state, physical health, and motivation. And try to communicate that positivity in virtual meetings. I find that the more I connect with people virtually, the more I'm enjoying it and I feel connected, so therefore happy, which makes me smile more, and the whole thing is a virtual circle. To support this positivity, I would encourage trying out dressing for work sometimes, or at least ensuring you're not in pajamas or a tracksuit every day. Using the camera for meetings as much as possible, as when people retreat behind a screen, it can be troublesome in more ways than one. And moving into our fourth area, really focus on listening hard to others and enjoying it. And here I mean really listen, not only to what people are saying, but beyond the words. What are people dealing with at home, and how are they coming to their work meetings? There may be simple things you can do to help. Important things will emerge if you really listen, and we all need to make the time for that. I want to end with a short story which Louise, my colleague, who has helped pull today's talk together, and thanks again for that, Louise, you're fab, heard over 20 years ago, and it's always stayed with her, and it's a really good story. It's about two woodcutters who decide to conduct a competition to see who's the fastest woodcutter. They decide to compare how many trees they've cut down during the day, both starting and finishing at the same time. The first woodcutter works tirelessly. They want to prove that they're the best and spend the whole day out in the woods cutting. They're annoyed when they see their colleague stopping, but this makes them sure they'll beat their rival. At the end of the day, they compare the trees they've cut, and the second woodcutter wins. Why is that? Well, they took time out to sharpen their axe. So, I just want to highlight how important and valuable it is for us to take time out to sharpen our own axes. It's not a waste of time, but is important to ensure we're in the best position to react and respond to all that comes towards us. The tips I've provided you with today have come either from myself or from resources in the Career Hub. Please do look on there if you haven't yet, as it provides a huge amount of information to support your business and behavioural skills. And a 5-minute podcast from my Strategic Insights series may be just the quick fix you need to get you into a more positive frame of mind. I also just want to mention our mentoring scheme. In stressful times like these, it can be good to have someone with whom to talk things through. And our mentors have lots of experience, including having worked through crisis situations in the past. They are volunteers, so please do use them. And if there's anything else we can help with, we're here for our members through thick and thin, so just reach out. Well, thanks again for joining us today. I hope you got something out of that session, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the International Treasury Week. Thank you.